Thank you very much, Rowan, for the kind introduction. I'm going to be talking about the Wild Coast. For those of you and many of you who know Wild Coast, they know that I cannot cover everything, but I will talk from where I stand. In other words, I'll dig from where I stand and expecting other people to dig where they stand, and we meet somewhere in the center of the planet. And in terms of the content, I'm going to be talking to some of these in terms of, the details to be covered. And then, for those who might not be aware, if you're looking at the Wild Coast is in the Eastern Cape Province, and it's more from the KZN border, in other words, from the top, and then going all the way towards East London. So it is that stretch of the coastline which is referred to as the Wild Coast. And for me, my home is the land closer to the KZN border. In other words, I'm in the far north or north end of the Wild Coast, in what is commonly known as Mbondoland, in other words, to the north of Port St. John's. These are the maps that show you some of the important area. Port Edward, which is up in the north, is the border with the KZN. And then you get to Mkambati. So the entire area between Port Edward and Mkambati Nature Reserve is what we call Amadiba, and that's the area where I was born. I grew up and I lived there. Then you go past Mboki and then Cremon Estates, all the way down Port St. John's, Umgazi, all the way down till you get down to East London. That's what the Wild Coast, and those are the rivers. And you can see that there are there's no road parallel to the coastline. All the little roads, they lead up to the N2. So, but that's about to change with central planning another. In terms of the people of the Wild Coast, you will see that again, starting from the north, going down in the area where it says Mpondo, and Lusigisigi is where the Royal Palace is. That's the Kingdom of Amampondo, and those are my people. And you can see inland, you find Amaxesibe in areas around Mount Alif, and then Amapaca around Mount Frey, and then Pondomisep, Kombutsolo. But if we come back down to the coastal areas, you will see that also Mpondoland, or the land of Amampondo, is divided into two and divided by Umzimvubu River. We have Mpondo to the south of Umzimvubu River, which is south of Port St. John's, with 3 towns there, Libote, Port St. John's, and Ngeleni. And in the east, there is Mbizana and Flagstaff, Lusigisiki, and Tabankulu inland. And those are the towns in the eastern Pondoland. And then you have Bomvana. If you go down to the Tembuland region, you have got Bomvana, which is in the coast, which in areas around Coffee Bay, between Umtata River and Mbashe. But then as you go further inland, then you have Tembuland, Abatembu, which is where Mandela comes from, in the coastal area, which is known as Bomvana. That's where Bantu Olomisa comes from. And then you've got the Kalega people. When, in terms of us as the people of what used to be Transkei, what you're seeing there, the people who are known as Xhosa proper is your Kalega people and your Khakhabe people. Khakhabe is further down in what used to be former Ciskei. Those are the Xhosa people. Otherwise, Mandela came from the land of Abatembu. So Bomvana and Tembu, they are all under the same king, the king of Tembuland, which is Buyelikaya. And then, yeah, so I just wanted, because that map of the former Transkei kind of shows you who lives where. In particular, I'm more interested on the coastal area of the Wild Coast, in terms of, then you can see where it says Nqiga, Gcalega and Nqiga, there is the Kai River, which we call Inqiba in the isiXhosa language. And then I know that it's usually very difficult for people to tell the difference between Amampondo versus AmaXhosa. So on the right-hand side, those ladies are that's AmaXhosa. You can see those big head scarves there. And those ones, that photo, I took it amongst in the Bomvana area, in other words, in the Tembuland or in the Tembu Kingdom. And on the left-hand side, that's me, my wife, and my daughter. So that's how in Bondoland, that's how we dress in terms of the traditional Mpondo attire. And that blanket that you see there is a blanket that you will only find it in Bondoland. And it's very colorful, how our traditional, the same with the beads and all of that. And those who have lived in Bondoland before the mid-70s, they will remember Ifelani, they will remember the head thing, they remember the ladies' hair and all of that. But that kind of shows you the difference, even the way we do the hair. Whilst the Abatembu and the Maxhosa, the women, they shave off their hair. In Bondoland, women grow their hair. They'll only cut it when they are bereaved, when their husbands die. Same applies to men. Men are supposed to keep their hair. Don't ask me where is mine. And then that shows you some of the colorful Mpondo culture. In terms of those were the dance moves, but you can see again in the lady in the middle, the head ring, the beaded. So that's just to help you tell the difference. The young men, in terms of the groupings, we call these people Indlavini. So just wanted to share with you that in terms of the culture, is I would say to a certain extent very intact. The Indlavini is one grouping. We still have another grouping, which is Amapungu, but that shows you Indlavini. And then I will quickly move on to land and livelihoods in terms of we're still using the oxen to cultivate their fields. You can see that picture was taken in Sigidi village near Mzamba River mouth, which is more closer to KZN border, just across from the Wild Coast Sun. Those are sweet potato patches, and Sigidi is a village that produces most sweet potato. And during the sweet potato season, which stretches from March to September, that village, just one village, makes more than R1 million per month. Should be, sometimes would be 2, because each back load will take a load that is valued at about 100,000 rands, and there are 7 bakkies, so that's 700,000. If they come twice, then per week, then So in terms of the land and the livelihoods, and also it's important to note and to mention that that land where these people produce so much sweet potato, which is sold directly to Durban informal market, is the same land that government wants to mine. Those of you who watch what's coming from the Wild Coast, they will know that the people of Xolobeni in Amatiba, they've been fighting against that proposed mine by an Australian company for more than 20 years now. So, so the land is, and one of the arguments by the people is that their land is fertile and it is a source of food, so they don't want it trashed. So it's an ongoing battle. This second photo is showing you Mzamba River mouth. So to the left is what used to be the property given to the Wild Coast son, to Saul Kesner. And then to the right, across the river, to the right, or the southern bank, that is the Sigidi village where I said this picture with the span of oxen was taken from. So the land is a source of livelihood. So people still produce lots of their food from the land. You will see that there is a community nursery there. So all the coastal villages, they have community nurseries where they propagate the seedlings. And that one is at Kwanyana River mouth. But all the coastal villages, they've got nurseries where seedlings are produced that are grown in order to achieve the goal of food sovereignty within the communities. People still use the traditional ways. Of course, you have your modern milling, but they still use the traditional milling where they use those stones that still widely practiced. Almost every homestead has got that milling stone. It's still being used. These photos were taken earlier this year. And then in terms of the geology of the Wild Coast, you can see that the greatest part of the Wild Coast is influenced by your Karoo formation in terms of the geology. So the Karoo has got a big influence. But then when you get to our area there, you can see some unique geology, and I'll be talking more to that. But the biggest part of the Wild Coast is affected by your Karoo formation. You would see actually even in places such as Mboki, all the way down past Coffee Bay, that you actually see those clay formations, which are symbolic of your Karoo Basin formations. And then if we're looking in the upper Wild Coast, from Port St. John's, the two gates on either side of Umzimvubu River, you have Mount Tesiga and Mount Sullivan. On top, you can see those cliffs, towering cliffs, and you can see the sandstone. You can see the sandstone formation there on top. And then as you walk or travel northwards towards Mboki, that geological formation disappears. Then it reappears again as you get to Magwa, all the way down just to the north of Mboki, from Magwa waterfall, and then you start getting these flat-topped hills, just like you see in Port St. John's. And that geological formation, we refer to it as Mzigaba Sandstone Formation, and it stretches all the way through to the KZN side. But that geological formation is what we call the Ponderland Center, because overlying there you find a unique vegetation, and that is confined within the 20 kilometers of the coastline. Is where we find the Ponderland Center of Endemism, which I will allude to later on. So that's all part of the geology, but that's the northern Wild Coast. It's not the entire coastline, as you can see. It's to the north of Port St. John's, and it goes into KwaZulu-Natal through Oribi Gorge. Actually, the rocks you see in Izingolweni, Oribi Gorge area, Elands Nature Reserve, all the way through across Mzimkhulu and Mzimkhulwana rivers there. So that's all the Mzigaba Sandstone Formation. So Mzigaba is named after the river. Most people know it as Mzigaba. It's actually Mzigaba whose homestead it is anyway. And I think whilst I'm there, I could also mention that The other rivers as well that people know, like this river known as Mtamvuna, and then you go down on the northern border of the nature reserve. You have got what is called Mtentu. Actually, the correct name for Mtamvuna is Mtauvumi. The medicine doesn't work, but colonial tongues always get twisted, and so people try to simplify those difficult. So it's Mtauvumi because the medicine collected there didn't work. And then they went further down at what is called today Mtentu, is Mti Wetu, Mtetu, our medicine. So the medicine collected from there, from the herbs in that river, worked. So therefore they call it Mtetu, our medicine. And that one, Mtauvumi, the medicine doesn't work. Just some for the sake of those who have always wondered why those rivers. In this picture, you're seeing a typical geology, which is what I was referring to, Mzigaba sandstone formation. And this sandstone formation dates back to, on average, about 400 million years ago is when it was formed. And it was formed underwater, under the ocean. So in other words, the sea level used to be somewhere inland. And then due to the upliftment of the land, due to the upwelling of magma, so the land was raised, then the ocean retreated. It went further offshore, and then these rocks that were formed under marine conditions under the ocean were then exposed. But these rocks are very old. Like I said, on other some researchers, they estimate about 365 million years, some 400, some even go further to 412 million years ago when they were formed on the ocean floor. So the fact that the landscape actually got pushed up or was raised by upwelling of magma, you see the evidence when you go to the bottom of those gorges. You will find the igneous rocks, sometimes massive igneous rocks. And what happened was that because of this raised coastline, then the rivers that used to join the ocean in a flat area, all at a sudden, these waterfalls were then now plunging down to the waves from an elevated level. And these waterfalls started cutting back, so forming these very deep gorges that you see. You see them in Mtamvuna River, and you go to Mzamba River. You see, you go to Mnyameni, Mpahlane, you go to Mtetu, you go to Mzigaba, all of these rivers. You go to Mkweni River near to the south of Grosvenor side. All of them, Lupotano River, Mlambo Mkulu. So all of them were very deep. You go to Kedupos and Johnson, Mzimfugo River, because these waterfalls, they started cutting back a series of waterfalls, one after the other, leaving behind this. And the other interesting thing whilst I'm on it is that even if you go offshore, you take a boat and go offshore, you will find that in line with these deep gorges, again, you find a gorge that extends to about 15 kilometers offshore in line with this, because the current sea level is not what it was like during the last ice age. The sea level used to be further offshore within the Mondolan coastline. Actually, the shoreline used to be another 15 kilometers offshore, which gives us a very narrow continental shelf, and I will come back to that story as well. And when you cross Nkotusweni River, which is in Noqekwana, or some people know it as Boonskop, you come across this dicotyledite, very hard and very sharp, beautiful rocks. Even on the Long Beach in Port St. John's, in the Long Beach to the north of Port St. John's, you find this beautiful dicotyledite, very, very hard right at the bottom. Is actually right at the bottom because it was formed in previous ice age, not the recent one. So that's all part of the interesting geology that you actually find within the wild coast. In some places, you find these beautiful conglomerates, these pebbles that were stuck on mud, which later solidified to form these conglomerates. So, and even if people have been to Mboki, they know that on the Mboki beach, even up to Mkozi beach, you find these conglomerates, even within Mkambati, and in all the sites that contain some petrified wood and some you actually always find the stones stuck on what used to be mud, but which has since solidified to form a rock. And then I'd like to go further and talk about the Pondoland Center of Endemism. Pondoland Center of Endemism, remember I said this is found right where that Mzigaba geological formation is found. Then you find the what we call the Pondoland Center of Endemism. The Pondoland area, or in our area within the wild coast, we find about 2,253 species of plants, of which 196 are endemic. So we find 196 endemic plants within the PCE, or the Pondoland Center of Endemism, which makes it very unique. And those who are familiar with the place, they know that you even find some a very unique coconut palm that you see, the gray palm that you see there. That's Eutychiosis cafra, which is the Pono coconut palm, and which is found in only 2 rivers. It's one of the 196 endemics, and it's only found on the northern bank of Mtetu River or Mtentu River, and also on the northern bank of Mzigaba River. So both of those rivers, Mtentu is the border on the northern side of the nature reserve Mkambati, and whilst Mzigaba forms the southern boundary. So only in those 2 rivers, not anywhere else. And that's typical of the Pondoland endemics. They are very site specific. Only 4 of those 196 will be found in all sites. Most of them, you find them in a particular distribution. So, and with a very small populations, which makes them very vulnerable and very sensitive. And the third part is that also the area that government has been trying to mine at Xolobeni is also part of this very small biodiversity hotspot. Globally, we have about 34 biodiversity hotspots, areas of high endemism, but which are highly threatened by human activities, which are 70% transformed. And the PCE, or the Pondoland Center, is one of those 34 biodiversity hotspots, making this Upper Wild Coast a very, very special place in terms of botanical heritage. So, for instance, this is one of the very special plants that you find, one of the endemics. This one is Eugenia albanensis. Can see the plant is very small. It cannot carry the weight of the fruit. So the fruit rests on the ground, but it's attached to that. And also, that's like a leaf. The actual tree is underground. It's a subterranean tree. You will find the stems of this as big as your arm underground, but it's just a very small twig on the surface. It's an adaptation against fires. So the actual tree, I remember when Tony Abbott and other botanists, they tried to dig out, and they couldn't reach the bottom of the plant. Some of them estimated to be as old as 2,000 years. So very unique plants. That's the Eriosima, which is one of the plants that are found there. So there are many beautiful plants. For instance, this second picture shows you Kwanyana River mouth on the background, and this Protea welwitchii, which the in the entire Wild Coast, you only find the colony at Kwanyana, not anywhere else. You find all those geysers, you find these your Pachikapas. So you find all these amazing. You also find the colonies of your Leucospermum innovans, the pincushions, which are found in the Wild Coast. Leucospermum innovans, and the colonies. There's quite a few colonies of this one. You find it at Mpahlana River mouth, which is between Mzamba and Mpahlana. You find it on the Mnyameni River Gorge, far inland, and you find it to the south of Msigaba, about half a kilometer from the lighthouse in Msigaba. You find two beautiful colonies there. And then also at Mbaxeni. So there are very few places where you find these beautiful, in a very unique and a large population of these plants. You also find some ericas, which are remnants of the fine-boss vegetation in the Cape. Erica tupica is found mainly in the wetland areas. Beautiful erica that is very common within the Wild Coast. And then if we were to go back and start from the north, from in what is the Wild Coast Sun property, you find Mzamba fossil beds. And these fossil beds, they are exposed mainly, these are petrified woods. These petrified woods that date back to 80 million years ago, when the Mzamba River came down in flood, trembling with these big logs, which were then deposited on the beach. But these fossil beds with these petrified woods, you don't only find these petrified, but you also find on the cliff line, right there, you find lots of your ammonites and your clams. In other words, the shells of the ancient marine shellfish is also found embedded, layers upon layers that must have been deposited over thousands of years that you find on the cliff there. Alternate layers that kind of mark that there must have been times of heavy rainfall when these were deposited. So these fossil beds are not only at Mzamba River mouth. When you go further down towards Mnyameni, you'll find some. You get to Kwanyana River mouth, you'll find petrified wood, lots of it there. When you go to the south, closer to Sikombe at Sifebeni Beach, you find them. You get to Mkambati, you find them there. You get to Mzigaba River mouth. Mzigaba River mouth, you'll also find, even in the forest where the cottages are, when during construction there, some petrified wood have been found. So in other words, littered along, and I know that somewhere closer to Mngazana, yes, closer to Mngazana River mouth as well, I've seen some beautiful fossil deposits there. So these fossils are littered all along the Wild Coast, some of which date back to the time during the splitting of your Gondwana. But the most important thing is that you find these littered all over. But also people know that in the Wild Coast is one of the few places where you could find the cows on the beach. And also, talking of cows, again, in terms of colors, I think that could be a talk of its own when we talk about the colors of the Nguni cows and how we describe these cows. Like, for instance, that one being flies in the milk, for instance. We have got fascinating description, but I don't want to go there right now. So it's a talk that we can actually talk about it when we look at the indigenous knowledge and how these things, they are described in our culture. This is showing you the Mtendu estuary. I'm just taking you through with these photos so that we can kind of show you when we talk of the Wild Coast, what are we talking about? So on the northern bank is your Mtendu village, Nyavini, and then across on the southern bank is your Mkambati Nature Reserve, which is to the right. So, and then Yeah, that's Mthendu estuary. Mthendu estuary is the estuary which gets visited by kingfish every hot season. Kingfish, they migrate all the way from Mozambique and only come to one estuary in the Eastern Cape, the Mthendu one. No one knows why, but amazing navigation skills that these fish, they come right on this bend. When you want to watch them, this estuary, no fishing is allowed. So, and it is a protected estuary, is part of the Mbondoland Marine Protected Area. So, but your best spot to watch the kingfish is here, and they normally do a kind of circular movement here. No one knows what ritual they make, but they arrive round about October to March. You would find them here, and then just before the cold season kicks in, they migrate back. And the researchers, ORI, the Oceanic Research Institute, and somewhere in Devon, in particular, Dr. Bruce Mann, has actually led a team of marine biologists who have come here and they've tagged them. They've managed to observe and to look at their movement during this migration. So that's something very special about the Mthendu, which I said is Mthethu River estuary. And then we also, the Pondoland Wild Coast is also known for its beautiful waterfalls. And the two waterfalls which you see here, they are within the river known as Mkweni, and Mkweni River is within the Lusikisiki area. And so this is just to show you, we know that also within the Lusikisiki you've got your Magwa, but even to the north of Mkambati you've got other waterfalls there, like your within Mthendu River Gorge, there are several waterfalls there. You can count up to 5 or 6. You go further up at Mnyameni, there's a big waterfall. All of these rivers are with beautiful. So Pondoland within the Mzigaba Sandstone Formation is also a world of waterfalls. Excuse me. And then I think all those who have been to the Wild Coast, they know about Waterfall Bluff, which is one of the very spectacular waterfalls that plunges onto the ocean. It's not the only one. Within that stretch, within a stretch of about maybe 1.5 kilometers, if you go southwards, you also get to Mfihlelo Waterfall. Within here, that's what Mfihlelo looks like, which is another waterfall there within this. And this is a cliff line. I said it forms part of the Ecos fault line. And these waterfalls that are plunging down, archaeologists are telling us that during the glacial maximum, that is about between 24,000 to 12,000 years ago, before the glaciers started melting in the last ice age, these waterfalls were about 15 to 20 k's away from the shoreline. But then when the glaciers started melting, then the sea level rose, the water came back. But because this coastal area, the land has been forced to rise, so this emerged coastline therefore blocked out the ocean, and then as a result, we've got a very narrow continental shelf. Some of the spectacular features of the Wild Coast, like your Cathedral Rock, which is found again to the south of Waterfall Bluff. Within 1 kilometer from here, you get to Waterfall Bluff as you move northwards. And then we know that Ngazana, which is to the south of Port St. John's, is another beautiful part of the Wild Coast, which has got the biggest mangrove forest in the Eastern Cape, the third largest. I think it's about 118 hectares of mangroves. You find all three species, your white, your black, and your red mangroves within Umngazana River, which is just to the south of Port St. John's. So another very special. But of course, whenever there are these beautiful places, the other thing we always have to deal with is the people wanting to have their holiday homes right on the sensitive. So you can see the number of cottages there, which is another serious threat in terms of the impact, negative impact on this sensitive environment within our coast. So that's Umngazana estuary. And then the communities of Trebeni, which is the village right there at adjacent to this, are also have started honey production there. They've got bee boxes which are kept within the mangroves there, so producing a very, which was an amazing work which was funded by Ackerman Foundation amongst others. But the factory where they were doing the processing has since burnt down due to conflicts in the community. But fortunately, the bees are still doing their magic, and people are still able to harvest the honey and be able to supply to the market. And then the other common features, of course, are your hole in the wall, which is to the south of Coffee Bay, which are some of the greatest landmarks that the Wild Coast is known for. And all of the, if you're looking at the rocks there, you will see that they are part of your Karoo Formation. And then I'd like to move on talking about, to continue to talk about what's special, the attributes to the Wild Coast. One of the amazing things about the Wild Coast is the archaeology or the archaeological sites that are found not just in these big, in all the big caves. When you go in there, you find evidence of human habitation, which happened in particular during the last ice age. Most of these very big caves, the cave, the one to the left, this one is found within Kweni River, inland. It's not very close to the beach, maybe about 5 kilometers away from the beach. And then the one on the right here, which we call it the big cave, Nomkulu, is within my village, within Amatiba. In all of these caves, you will find shell middens, you will find broken clay pots, you find Stone Age tools, you find bones of wild animals. So there's a very clear evidence, well preserved within this. And these, and they were used, these shelters, they were used by people during the last ice age, but and it's an evidence of these sites that were occupied. And then if you looking in the Upper Wild Coast again, from Port Edward, you find these red deserts. In Port Edward, they see the nature reserve, they're called the Red Desert Nature Reserve. And this, and then when you go down and you cross Mnyameni River, immediately on the southern bank of Mnyameni River, you find this red desert. It goes on, this one, which is the biggest of them all. That's the biggest one, is at Kwanyana River mouth, the river you see there. That's Kwanyana. So these red deserts, again, when you look closely into these, you will find that when the sand is being blown away, then it leaves behind this gravel of stones and pebbles. And when you look closely, you find like myriads of Stone Age tools that are littered all over those. In other words, because during the last ice age, there were two places that were habitable in Southern Africa. And this was the Limpopo Valley, which is where you find your Mapungubwe heritage site, and then the Wild Coast. So the entire Wild Coast area, some of you would know that even in East London, you find some well-preserved shell middens. So you find shell middens, broken clay pots, and these bones, the Stone Age tools, the hand axes, your scrapers, your arrowheads, all of them. And in a site like this one, you actually, here at Kwanyana in the Cloven area, you would find some Stone Age tools that date back to 300,000 to up to 500,000 years ago, which belong to the Sangoan Stone Age era. So these were sites that were occupied. So the entire coastline, Wild Coast, and said to say that in 2008, when the government issued a mining license, the first area that was targeted was this particular desert that you see here, Kwanyana River. And because of the sand being blown away, the heavy minerals, they remain here. And then as a result, with very high concentration of heavy minerals such as your titanium, ilmenite, and butamite. So therefore, so making it a very serious target. You will see that on the edge of these is your very fertile cultivated lands, which you find here. And even if you go there, know that Twas fields are somewhere there. You can see some of the cultivated lands. Those are all sweet potato patches there. And so these are the cultivated. You can see even some areas that used to be the contour lines. So these used to be some of the very fertile. And this what you see here is the land, because the area that the government wants to mine at Tolobeni stretches from the high water mark up to 1.5 kilometers. So all what you see here is the land that our government wants to see mined. Okay. So this is a closer look up into the deserts, looking at your shifting sands and the streams close by there. The trees lining up are able to hold the sand back, but of course, these places are actually, you see, and also a close up, you can see these stones. That's where you find all these the Stone Age tools. As the sand gets blown away, then it exposes these Stone Age tools. So this is still at Kwanyana. So these, you can see the arrowheads here, you can see the hand axes to the right. And then, yeah, you can see there were beautiful scrapers and all that. And these hand axes arranging for a tip. So they are like, you just see like hundreds. You get there, they are just everywhere. And which making these, in terms of the National Heritage Act, making these heritage sites. But of course, nothing stops the government from issuing the license. And it's a battle that we've been fighting for more than 20 years now, trying to stop that happening. So far, we've been able to, but we don't know for how long. People would remember that we even, Community of Kolobeni in 2018, April, went to court, to North Gauteng High Court, requesting for a declaratory order where they wanted the court to declare that they have the right to say no. So this is what it looks like. You can see the shells that you find in caves. Some of these caves, like 15 to 20 caves inland, but you find these shell middens as an indication that people used to travel from here all the way to the ocean to collect shellfish. You find these broken clay pots, beautiful clay pots, which have been made and fine, well made, so that you find when you get to these sites. So and then also this coastline again, in particular from Zamba River mouth going all the way down to Port St. John's, you have what we call the Ponderland MPA. The word Ponderland is supposed to have a capital letter M before P. P is not supposed to be capital letter because Amampondo, there are people who are descendants of Mpondo, who was a twin to Mpondo Mise. So this Ponderland MPA, which was declared in about 2000 or 2004, is being monitored and has been very successful. A unique stretch of wild coast South Africa, largest coastal MPA, and is home to an incredible diversity of marine life, including many threatened fish species. That's the size in terms of square kilometers, stretches for 90 kilometers along the spectacular wild coast from southern bank of Mzamba River to the northern bank of Mzimvubu River in Port St. John's. The MPA extends approximately 10 kilometers offshore to the 1,000 meter depth contour. Some of our healthiest estuaries are protected in this, and in particular, I can mention Mtento estuary and Mzigaba or Msigaba. The MPA protects the rich diversity of marine fish found in the area, including heavily overexploited lionfish species such as your red steenbok, black mussel cracker, Scotsman, yellow belly, rock cod, and many others. Okay, so then there's the map that shows you the extent of the MPA. I'm going to try and so I've already mentioned these ones. I'm going to try and move quickly now so that I can get to there are challenges within the wild coast. There are challenges in terms of, if we were to talk about the protection of the wild coast, there are challenges which are mainly about trashing, I would say trashing of the wild coast, but most people, politicians and economists, they would argue it is the development of the wild coast. But again, we can talk about what development is from the perspective of the local people and perspective of politicians and economists and all that. So these I'll call it trashing because, for instance, now we've been fighting this shale or exploration for oil and gas, which we know that if oil is found, we're very likely to have our ocean being polluted by oil. So therefore, this taming of the wild coast is posing serious threat to all what I've explained. The oil and gas exploration, which is being the entire coastline of South Africa, has been subdivided into portions which are being sold to the so-called investors, which is very unfortunate in the face of climate change. To be a country that is still very much vested on exploring for oil and gas, given the fact that we see what's happening with climate, we hear what is being said by scientists, and also for me as a rural person, having seen that the people who are most vulnerable to climate change are those poor people. We saw in Durban the recent floods, for instance. In rural areas, in my village, many people lost their cattle. In some families, losing up to 7 cows that they woke up, they were dead due to cold during those recent rains in April. And how our animals, they are getting sick. So it's a serious thing. The N2 Coastal Road is another pattern that we are still negotiating now to push the road a little bit inland, away from the coast, because Sanral is routing the road to go in the sensitive environment. And we believe that pushing it a little bit away from the coast would be able to protect the sensitive environment. Of course, the people of Xolobeni have been fighting to stop the proposed mine for more than 2 decades now. We know that the advancement, if you want to call it advancement, in agriculture, where more and more chemicals like Roundup are being used. We know Roundup is banned in many countries because of its impact on the environment. These things, they're coming up. The plastic pollution in the oceans is growing everywhere. In the wild coast, we have the same challenge now. It's very common that after heavy flooding, if you walk along the rivers, you will see all this plastic hanging up on trees. So the Kolobeni mining is another challenge, and the N2, the yellow line there you see is the proposed N2 toll road, and we are proposing that after crossing Mtendu River, this road must go straight inland till it gets to Siapambili, so till it gets there and then come down, instead of coming all the way down to Kolobeni, because also people of Kolobeni are convinced that these shaded areas here are the areas that the Kolobeni mining. This is Mtendu River here. These are all the 5 blocks they are planning to mine. And all the red dots you see here, these are all the houses that would be directly impacted by mining. It's about 72 of these, and the majority of them are at Mtendu. So these are all the challenges, and these are put forward as a way to create jobs, to grow the economy. But at the end of it all, you can see clear evidence that the outcome to the local people is going to be the cost of that, where they're going to have to live with the polluted environment, where the right to a safe and healthy environment is going to be trashed. Okay, so we have seen that all the movements, and this photo here was the march at Kolobeni, people saying no, so saying hamba fusekshel, auna sazela, you have got no guilty conscience. These 2 ladies were protesting up in England in the support of us within the Wild Coast. So you have seen, but people have been up in arms, and they're still up in arms against what is being proposed. So in particular, the fisher folks, the entire coastline of South Africa, cannot believe that the ocean is actually being given away. So these were the youth that we took in our area to raise the awareness and to do the protest as well. This was on the 8th of June, which was the World Oceans Days. So the people of Kolobeni marching, crossing in Zamba River. Neville from Green Connection in Cape Town was there on the 5th of December, and Neville has just won from Ecologic Awards, the Ecoria category just now. There is Neville there, so it has been very hard at work. So, and then what are we doing? In terms of the work that I do, I work with Sustaining the Wild Coast, SWC. I work with Siyazi Trust, which is based up in Zululand, but working within Amadiba. We're working with SENBI, Department of Fisheries, Forestry and Environment, where we're getting the young people employed. So we've got various partners. We're working on youth empowerment so that the young people become the stewards to look after the land, the agroecology done by Siyazi Trust, SWC. Even we're working with SEFC, South African Faith Community Environment Institute, Sustaining the Wild Coast, and Siyazi on the agroecology, activism by local communities, a lot that we could talk about in terms of how people are, and active participation in the conservation of MPA. We have been giving talks in global, national, and regional conferences about what's happening in our area and what we would like to see improve. Ecotourism development, the training of guides, the development of homestays within the Wild Coast. All of these are all the initiatives that are focusing on how do we protect the integrity of the Wild Coast, where we're able to bring in tourists and to enjoy. We have their accommodation facilities belonging to the people, Yomaka Waterfall, the homestays where tourists come and they sleep or on the mattresses or on the floor. The homestays where the Magic Mamas, they do the hosting of people. agroecology, where we teach people how to make their own fertilizers, the seed saving, there's the seed saving, the food festivals where we exchange seeds. And this is beetroot, for instance, from Nogcinile near Mtendo River mouth. And you can see all the green stuff that fixing the soil, see all the weed. We also working with the teachers. These were the teachers from one of the primary school, Kumbuza Primary School, and I was there talking to them about this archaeological site in the big cave within our village, showing them what topics they would. So school programs where we are able to help the schools to be able to. Near Kwanyana, that was the Red Desert I showed you earlier on, the community of Mbindweni and Mtolani are building their own community-owned lodge where they are planning. They are also putting together the permaculture gardens to produce food for that lodge, which is going to be available. They've built a road on their own that leads to this place, crushing stones there to open up. And so there's lots of the amazing work that is being done to actually in agroecology and ecotourism by the communities. The fantastic thing is that this ecotourism that would be owned by and run by the local communities. So if we were to talk, I'm going to spend I'm moving towards my final, I'm close to the end. In terms of the conservation, in South Africa, we tend to dwell more on protected areas where we would fence off an area and kick out people and all of that. There are other options. If you look at IUCN options for conservation, like your biosphere reserves, I know that we've got quite a few of these biosphere reserves, which allow people to live in. And I think one of those, we have to acknowledge the fact that the wild coast is what it is and still looking beautiful because of the low impact by the people who live there. And we need to acknowledge that. And we need, when we plan whatever conservation option, we need to work with the people who are, up until now, have been. If you were to compare, when you cross the border into KZN, you look at what the south coast is like of KZN, and you look on this side, so we need to acknowledge the fact that the lifestyle of those people in rural areas is what has helped us to be able to keep the beautiful wild coast which we have. So, and then we need to look at what options would recognize and be able to limit the negative impact. We need to look in terms, for instance, of extending those MPAs and what role could communities play in terms of monitoring the enforcement of the regulations within the MPA, enforcement of the no fishing areas. Problem is that when you bring in the people from outside to come and enforce those things, they are then seen as enemies. So getting the local people and training, giving them the requisite skills so that they are able to do the conservation on their own is quite important. We can have the World Heritage status. If you look at all the things I mentioned, from the fish, endemic species, the endemic vegetation, you look at the archaeological side. So you can see that the Wild Coast qualifies actually to become a World Heritage site, but we have not yet been able to move. Instead, we are busy trying to chase away miners from the Wild Coast, from the oil and gas exploration to also to terrestrial ecosystem mining by overseas. So we need to look at an option where we could keep the people in the protected area and use, like people have done, build their capacity. Asante sana. Thank you very much.
If there are any questions and answers, please raise your hand. Otherwise, we shall move to or just wave up and down or use the reaction tools provided by Zoom. Otherwise, we can start with the questions in the chat section. Let's do with Chris Foot's question. Do the kingfish breed there too, or only in Mozambique, when you spoke about the kingfish in the river?
That's a good question. I wish I wish we had amongst the people watching Dr. Bruce Mann to be able to tell us the. So I'm saying they come in the hot season. I'm not a specialist in that field, but yeah, it's a very good question. I hope there is a marine biologist who would be able to help to tell us there. Thank you.
If there is anyone, then please do so. Marty, your hand's up. Can I ask you to unmute? There we go.
Thanks for a very interesting talk, Sinegugu. I was just wondering, and it obviously happened many years ago now, but the actual impact of the Wild Coast Sun as a development, what was it? Did it have positive or negative or what? Because yeah, I'm just interested if you could talk about that. I know we spoke a lot about mining and other, in a way that is tourism, but
Right.
I think
Yes.
at the time it was, there were objections to it. Is it a good story or a bad story?
Yes. Okay. The Wild Coast Sun, unfortunately, I think there is more bad story to it than the good story. Okay. In the local people, if you go to, we often talk of Abasusa, the people who were removed there. The people in the land that Wild Coast Sun is built were forcibly removed. So people refused to move, but then they brought in the bulldozers for those people who were still remaining there, and people had to run with the clothes on their back. There are still songs that are sung today about the traditional leader, because the traditional leader back then was Kondiso, who loved his alcohol. And then people still sing today about the traditional leader who loves alcohol and gave away the land. People were never, it was never negotiated. They were not consulted. The land was just given away to Matanzima regime. They forced the traditional leader to sign away the land, and land was taken from the people. So it was a very sad. But also the other challenge with a development like the Wild Coast Sun is that it takes lots of land, because they wanted to build the golf course. And it's the golf course that takes lots of land. Had they taken only the piece of land on which the hotel was to be built, it would not have had lots of the negative impact. Promise that you took a large chunk of land from Mtamvuna River down to Mzamba River, and then people, they were pushed out. And then because of the job opportunities created by the casino, then people started moving from all over the country to be, and then you find a dense settlement pattern there. Then the next thing was that there was not enough water. The casino was built in the early 80s. And up until today, people don't have running water there. They have to buy water from Port and everywhere. So I think there's a lot of the negative things to say in terms of the impact. But the first mistake was to allocate so much land to a resort. When people talk about the golf courses, they say those tourists are playing golf on top of graves of our forefathers. So I think there's law. For instance, right in August this year, on the 17th, I took a group of boys from Clifton into Sigidi, across the Mzamba Gorge, across from the Wild Coast Sun. And one of the questions the boys asked was, because you don't want mining, would it be okay if they build another casino like the Wild Coast Sun? And then the old man said clearly that no, because only if they would negotiate with us, we would allocate the piece of land, and it would be a small piece of land, not that big chunk of land that was given to one man, and pushing away so many people whose graves are lying there now, flattened by golf courses. Thank you.
So just to tail on, if I can, so if the people had been consulted properly and all of that stuff, would they be open to further tourist type development like that, or would that also be objected to?
Okay, I think if you listen carefully to what I've said, for instance, one thing that would definitely be addressed is the question of size. How much land. So people are very much, the people of Kolobeni have made it very clear that there are two investments of choice: it's agriculture and ecotourism. So they are open to ecotourism, but of course it has got to be done at a manageable scale, a scale that would also, a resort like the Wild Coast Sun also requires lots of skills that the local people do not have. So, but when you are doing a tourism at a scale where you would be able to upskill those local people and then they'll be able to. So those are some of the things that you actually you consider: the impact on the environment, and then how much can the local people be involved and who benefits? Who are the shareholders? Where does the money being made? Where is the biggest chunk of that money? Where is it going to? Those are all the things that would be. But anything that is negotiated with the local people is possible because they will be able to set the boundaries and the limits of that development. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, sir.
Thank you very much, Mori. Gary, you can unmute yourself.
Hi, Sinegugu. Can you hear me?
Yes, Gary, I can hear you. Thank you.
So it's great to listen to your talk. Thank you so much, Sinegugu. And it's wonderful to be able to put this question to you, in public on a panel like this. So my first question is, one of the interviews you did in Quebec in the court case, you said that one of the things that your people need most of all is for especially the governments and Gwede Mantesh to listen to you, to hear you. Can you say a little bit more about that, please?
You see, if you're looking at we can look at the international law principles, we can look at the United Nations declarations on the human rights. So indigenous people like us, but any people, they've got the right to self-determination. Our constitution guarantees us the right to participate. And the participation is not just a box-ticking exercise. It's about the listening and listening earnestly. And once you listen and hear what people say, take into consideration and respond and address what is being raised. So listening, it also means consulting people. You need to make time. What we are seeing right now is our government's unwillingness to come and to listen. For instance, the Minister of Minerals and Energy, Gwede Mantesh, has been going around all over the country, talking to kingdoms, to kings, to traditional leaders. Traditional leadership system is a bottom-up system. Traditional leaders do not make decisions on behalf of the people. They are the servants of the people. People make the decision. It's a bottom-up, and they mandate the traditional leader. So therefore, when the government goes and consults with them, what does he expect? But of course, we see the trends because government has been passing laws in parliament which are giving traditional leaders the authorities they do not have in terms of customary law. So when we say the government must listen, government is important for them to come and listen to the people, to come and hear the views and consider those and implement the decisions that people make. On communal land, people have a right to say no. The IPILRA, Interim Protection of Land Rights Act, is about that, gives the rights to the people. So people have a right. It's not a privilege for people to listen to. That constitution and the rights in the chapter 2 of the constitution, which is the human rights do not belong to the government, but to the people. And it's about the government listening and hearing what people say. So, but we are seeing the growing trends where people are expected to appreciate the Father Christmas syndrome, where the politicians, when they come loaded with gifts like Father Christmas, people must clap hands and accept those gifts. It's not supposed to be like that. Government needs to hear from the people. The laws are very, very clear. Even at municipal level, you must hear the people out, and you must be able to speak to the needs of the people. You cannot just go ahead and issue a license to a multinational corporation to do as they wish, because you're going to make money, because you're going to grow the economy, and not consider how that development is going to affect the lives of the people and the lives of the future generations who are yet to be born. So it is important for us to know and to notice that people need nature to thrive, and nature doesn't need people. And if we do not protect the environment, we may not have a sustainable economic development. For the economy to be able to exist, it requires ecosystem goods and services. It needs clean water, clean air. Healthy ecosystem is the basis for a thriving economy. And we need to understand that. If we have an economic activity that is going to destroy the ecosystem goods and services, then we might as well, you see. And so we can talk about this. I'm saying we can have another talk where we talk about development, what development is and what it is supposed to be, and how the people on the ground feel about those things. Thank you very much, Gary.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gary. And then, and Sinegugu, for your question, let's go to the chat section quickly. There was a question from, and you've mentioned this before, Sinegugu, from Bridget Poole. What options are there for economic development to mitigate against the promises of mining and oil and gas exploration? And then secondly, is the cannabis industry an option? So that's again, agriculture and mining and gas and all of that.
Right. Okay. Right. Okay. I didn't catch the first one, the first question. I just can't see it there where you were reading from. What options are there for economic development to mitigate against the promises of mining and all? Okay. Right. First, cannabis. Cannabis is definitely an option, but again, in Bonderland, people have always grown cannabis. You can go all over the world. You can go to LA in the US. They know about the Mpondo strain of cannabis because we never stopped. We have been persecuted, we have been arrested. I remember as a young boy, on every Sunday we had a bus. People would come back on Friday night from Durban. On Sunday, they would travel back. And when they traveled back on Sunday, people would always, especially in winter, they would have the bags upon bags of cannabis that they take back to Durban to sell. And what happens is that you pack your cannabis on a separate bag, and the police would always do the roadblocks as you enter KZN or Natal. They would have roadblocks, and they would say people must come out with their bags. There will always be bags left unclaimed, and people would take the bags with their clothes. So we know if you go on the videos, and so people have always grown this, and unfortunately, it is in this democratic era that we have seen South African police services with helicopters that were staying in Port St. John's, that they went around spraying Roundup in the cannabis field. In this democracy of ours, it didn't happen during the apartheid years, but in this democracy, South African police, with all the crime that we have in the country, they saw it fit. The very black government, they saw it fit to come. The cannabis that survived, and the people, the rural economy that thrived, the parents that took us to universities and to schools with the cannabis money, which was illegal, of course. But this government was able to spray Roundup. We were only helped by lawyers, by human rights lawyers like Ricky Stone, who was able to challenge the government on that, and they were finally able to bring that to a stop. when people were getting all sorts of diseases coming from the spraying of Roundup, because it didn't only affect when you spray with the helicopter, you affect the air they breathe, you affect the streams where they fetch water and all of that. So the havoc that has been created by the government. For the cannabis, that has always been here. So cannabis is a potential. What government is doing now, they are issuing license, and license are costing millions. And therefore, when they're costing millions, they are going to the rich people with deeper pockets, because of course, I would not be surprised if politicians get a cut from those licenses. So, and they're making it impossible for the people who are the custodians of the indigenous knowledge of growing cannabis. People have been persecuted all of these years for growing cannabis. They now all of a sudden cannot afford the license. They cannot grow. You can grow only 4 plants, and they are not allowed to sell. So, but why not recognize the people who have always been the custodians of this growing of this plant? So cannabis is definitely an issue, but the problem we have is that it's the monopoly of the politicians who want to make sure that they give license to people and leave out in the code those who have been the custodians of that. So cannabis is an option, but the challenges that we are coming across in this country are unbelievable. Otherwise, it is an option. What are the people in Amadiba? I can only speak about my people in the Amadiba, the Upper Wild Coast. They have chosen that to say the economic activities of choice is ecotourism and farming. And remember, I told you that with the sweet potato that we produce is the best. If you think you have tasted sweet potato and you think you know the beautiful sweet potato, you must come to Bondoland. If you haven't tasted the Bondo sweet potato, you don't know nothing. So we have the best sweet potato, and our sweet potato, it goes to Durban informal market, and you can pay anything for it. I can invite you to come hiking. We also run hiking trails in Bondoland. I'm one of the guides. So that we take trails and we're able to tell these stories and to eat the sweet potatoes, to eat amadumbe, the taro yams, and all the amazing stuff which we have. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Sinegugu. Musa, you have a question, and then one last question from the chat. Musa, you are unmuted. There we go.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the wonderful presentation, sir. But I'd like to know if there's ever a point where you are as a conservationist feel as if you are somehow in contradiction to economic development, and if in as much as you guys are for the environment and trying to protect the land that people live in, and the people are themselves trying to protect the land that they're living in too, is there ever like a point where you feel like the struggle, like people struggling and not having jobs is a very great cost of protecting the environment? And if maybe at some point you feel like, you know what, no, I just you wanna commodify this whole environment and uplift people's standards, or do you always feel like it's always with the cost?
Thank you very much, Mrs. Ncube, all the way from Hammersmith. Good to see you. Yes, we are able, one of the reasons why we support agroecology. For instance, a farming that protects the integrity of the ecosystem is for that purpose. And the reason why we also raise a voice against the GMO, genetically modified maize, for instance, is for that same reason, to say, so we try to say, how do we make sure that there are jobs, that there are livelihoods, that the people are able to earn. So because, and our approach has been not the hardcore to say don't touch. Hence, even in MPA, we say the local people, they are the ones who must enforce. If you work with the local people and you build their capacity, you help them understand, you are going to be able to sustain. So we are not able to propagate or to promote a no touch. We are trying to promote a sustainable consumption in terms of how by the local people. If I can, for instance, give you an example. In the MPA area, in Bonal, because the wild coast is very rough, it's a very rough ocean. So people fish from the shore. But the biggest culprits in the MPA are the trawlers that come at night. I cannot name what country they come from, but they come from other countries. They come in at night and they put down nets and they take everything out in the MPA, the marine protected areas. And these government officials doing the law enforcement, they are busy arresting the people on the shoreline. But at night, they come, they switch off the engines, they switch off lights, those trawlers that come from other countries, and they take everything. And when people are busy reporting to the fisheries management, but they do not get a response. They never hear of anyone being, those ships, especially during winter, they come in. This year, for instance, people say for the first time in the shed season, there were no sheds. The cottage owners at Msigaba River mouth, when they went out, there's one guy who goes and dive and do spear fishing, who went out and found the nets underwater there. These shipping trawlers, they actually come in there, they put up nets, trapping all the fish, and they come back the following night and they pull that thing with all the fish in there. Fortunately, that man, when he found that net underwater, he was able to cut it and allowed all the fish to escape. So there's a whole lot. There are serious challenges that we are facing of the big corporations who don't give a damn about the sustainable consumption. So often, hence I kept on stressing that the fact that we still have these pristine ecosystems in the wild coast is thanks to the local people. Of course, the populations are growing. We know that that's not going to be forever. So that's why we need to have means and ways of managing. That's why we're talking about how do we work better to conserve what we have with the people, by the people, in order to sustain, so that the future generations could be able to find a wild coast that is still able to provide for them. Thank you very much, Mrs. Sinegugu.
Thank you very much, Sinegugu. Yes,
Thank you,
Chris.
Sinegugu. Yeah, sorry, I lost my video. Nevertheless, I saw that Gary Yanks wrote in the chat asking Sinegugu to please tell us how Indigenous wisdom might help humanity live in harmony within Mother Nature. I'm wondering if that's not worth another talk.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the short space of time and the fact that we are only 26 people left at this stage, whether we should not try and get Sinegugu, if he is willing to do so. Gary, I'm unmuting you to do a talk on that.
Yes.
Gary, your feeling?
Yes, I would.
Yes, yeah, no, it's the same.
Carry on, Sinegugu.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Yeah, yes, Gary, I cannot do justice to that. So, and I would be happy to give it another talk, and hoping load shedding will be kind enough as it been today. So, yeah, it's something that would be, because there's a lot to actually to explore in terms of the indigenous wisdom of the coexistence with nature and with wildlife. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks, Sinegugu.
Lovely.
Thanks, Ruan. You said there was another question in the chat that you wanted to...
There was one last question, and then I think we can greet Sinegugu from Jennifer Kolru. Thank you so much, and just wonderful. She wonders if the fossilized trees have been identified. as there are similar sites in Namibia, but inland. She was just intrigued about that.
Mm. Well, yes, yeah, I know that even within the Karoo in South Africa, you do find some areas with petrified wood. So it's very intriguing in terms of the changes that have happened within the planet during the past geological eras and eons. Yeah, it is always fascinating. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chris. I think then we can close the evening and say thank you very much to Sinegugu again for intriguing us with a wonderful talk and sharing your knowledge and wisdom. And we look forward to your next talk about the indigenous knowledge and wisdom of the peoples.